Hi student teachers. I'm going to use this screencast to orient you to the EdTPA. If you go onto our course assignment page on Blackboard, you're going to see that it says EdTPA Task 1 Due. I'm actually going to change the due date so that you have a little extra time. So if we go down to the calendar here, I'm going to ask you to submit this Wednesday, December 6th. So that is next Wednesday, and I'm going to write that right here so that you can see it. Okay. Now, you're going to notice when you look at the assignments, the EdTPA, Task 1, that I'm asking you for two different templates. I'm asking you for planning template A and also E. Okay, so it's right here for Task 1A and Task 1E. And notice that if you look on the assignments page and you look at this tab, you're not going to see the usual things you see, which are all of these models, right? So I'm going to show you where those are. If you go to the Information tab on Blackboard, you're going to see a file that says All Things EdTPA. We've looked at this a couple of times, and this is where you got your handbooks. If you scroll down, you're going to see Physical Education, Math, and Elementary Education. Now, there are some other tests as well, but they don't have to do with you. You're going to go to your discipline. So let's say that you're Phys Ed. You're going to click onto that, and what you're going to see here is you're going to see there's your handbook. There's this thing called Understanding Rubric Progressions, which we'll look at later. And then you're going to be looking for your templates up here. So for physical education, what you're going to be looking for are two templates. Task 1A, and this is true for everyone, Task 1A is your context for learning. So if you click that open, you're going to see your Task 1, this is called 1A, Context for Learning. And this is where you're going to fill in information about the school where you're teaching. And then there's a chart you're going to fill in how many students you have in class, whether they're classified, struggling, what kinds of learners they are. All of the information that you're going to need to complete 1A is going to be from your Task 1 from your teacher work sample. So you've already done this work, you just need to copy and paste. And notice on these templates a couple of things. You only get 4 pages, okay? You only get 4 pages, and that's because they want to make sure that you don't write too much. So try to keep that within 4 pages, okay? And again, you're just filling out, and this is a draft. Okay. Then if we go to, let's see, planning for instruction, it's called planning commentary, okay? So planning commentary, and this is again true for everybody. This is called Task 1 Planning Commentary, and this is Task 1E. So for this one, you're going to go through and you're going to fill in, on the templates, you always fill your work in these brackets, okay? So whenever there's a bracket, that means fill it in. And what you're going to be doing on these templates is you're going to be filling in the answers with 11-point font, and it needs to be Arial, A-R-I-E-L, Arial 11-point font. Now, everything that you need to do for Task 1, you have already done. You're going to find the information for Task 1 in your ETWS Tasks 2, 3, and 4. So you've revised those, you've had some feedback on them, and now what you're going to be doing is copying and pasting. So we're going to go through these. For physical education, you're going to have, all the questions are pretty much the same. I'll show you where there are going to be differences. So for physical education, you need to describe the central focus and purpose. So you're going to find that obviously in ETWS 2. Then it says, given the central focus, describe how your standards and learning objectives. So the standards and learning objectives, you've already written about those in ETWS 2 and also in ETWS 4, which are your lesson plans. So gather all of the objectives that you've articulated for your unit and the standards and write about them here. When you write about them, you want to kind of divide them up based on your discipline-specific questions. So for physical education, it's movement patterns, which is your psychomotor, performance concepts, which is your cognitive, and health-enhancing fitness, which is affective and also a little psychomotor. And you're going to address these 3 using the writing that you've already done. For elementary, it's going to be your overarching literacy strategy and the related skills. And for math, what you're going to have is your procedural fluency, conceptual understanding, and mathematical reasoning. Okay, so you're going to be writing about your standards there. Here you're going to explain how your plans build on each other. So you've already addressed this in your ETWS work. All you need to do now is copy and paste it into the bracket. Then you're going to have another question here for phys ed. How are you going to structure the learning environment to be both emotionally and physically safe? So that would be, how are you going to make sure that the gym is physically safe and also that students aren't, bullying each other, teasing each other. It's a safe space. For 2, this is knowledge of students to inform teaching. Now most of this you're going to get from your lesson plans. You've already done this work and you're going to be copying and pasting. You might have a little bit of information that you thought about in ETWS 2, which was your overview of your unit. So these questions should sound familiar. Prior academic learning and prerequisite skills related to the central focus. So cite evidence of what your students know, what they can do, and what they're still learning to do. So that's that question about what did your your cooperating teachers say about what your students know and can do? What have you assessed? What have you observed? How might the standards inform what you know that they can do, if they met them last year? So again, you're going to copy and paste the writing that you've already done about this in your lesson plans right here. So that's the prior knowledge. Here you're going to be copying and pasting. This question is about the personal, cultural, and community assets. So again, you've already been doing this thinking. It's in your lesson plans. Everything that you've written about how your unit is going to connect with your students' personal, cultural, and community assets, that's their interests, that needs to go here. And just remember what's really important, and we've already done this, but just think about this, is that whatever you write in here, in this bracket, and in this bracket, it's always connecting back to your central focus. Your central focus is your brain for this, right? It's your thesis. So all of your objectives and your standards and the prior learning and the personal and cultural community assets all connect back to your central focus. Now, supporting students' learning is going to vary. This is educational learning. So it's a little bit different than what the other templates are going to ask. But really what you all have in common is that for question 3, you need to do this. You need to justify how your understanding of your students' prior learning and personal assets guided your choice of the learning tasks. Okay? So that is, why are you teaching what you're teaching? How does that connect to their prior learning? And how does it connect to their interests? And then this is the question that connects with the research and theory. Remember, we did some work around research and theory, both for your assessment plans and also for your lesson plans. So this is where you're going to make a connection to that theorist and write about how that theorist kind of supports your ideas in terms of who your students are and why the learning activities and why the central focus is appropriate for them. This is the question that you have addressed at least 3 times in your lesson plans. So at the bottom of each lesson plan, you were asked about supports, right, and how they're appropriate for your whole class, individuals, and group of students. So that's where you're going to copy and paste and then maybe write a little bit more if you need to make revisions about how your instruction will support whole class, groups, and individuals. And we've done a lot of work in talking about that. So again, copy and pasting. This question is about common student errors and misunderstandings. So you have actually also written this, and you're going to find it in your unit plan, ETWS2, where you were writing about misunderstandings, misconceptions, and anticipating errors that students might make. You've done that a couple times, you've revised it. You might even have some more ideas about that now that you've taught and assessed the unit. 4 is your language function. So this is again where you're going to go back to your lesson plans and you're going to identify language demands that you have planned, because again, this is all planning. So you're writing this in future tense, so students will, we will, I will. That's important. They're writing it in, you're writing it in future tense, and you're going to be planning for language. So what's the language function? Okay, probably it's going to be, explain if you're phys ed. Maybe it's describe. All you need to do is you need to just write it in there. Okay, then what you're going to do is you're going to identify a key learning task from your plans. Now notice this is singular. You're just writing about one learning task, and they ask you to identify the lesson. So don't write about all 3 lessons. Choose one lesson. It doesn't matter which one it is. Choose the one that you think has the best academic language plan and write about that particular lesson. Okay? In which the learning task, so if you wrote explain up here, maybe you're going to be saying in lesson 2, I explained, and you're going to choose that and you're going to describe that. And then they're going to ask you about these additional language demands. So they want you to discuss right here in that bracket the vocabulary that you're planning on teaching and how you're going to teach it, and either syntax or discourse. So again, many of you have already set yourselves up to discuss syntax and discourse. Syntax is how students are organizing their language. So it could be a list, it could be a graphic organizer, and then discourse is the speaking that they're doing, where they explain or describe, or it could be writing that they're doing to explain or describe. And then D is where you're going to write in your language supports. So again, we spent some time talking about this in class, and you've drafted it out a couple of times. In terms of not only the one lesson you're writing about for B, C, but now they're asking you to refer to your lesson plans. So this is all of your lesson plans now, okay? So for D, you're writing about all of your lesson plans. Write about the language supports that you have put in place to support students with academic language. Again, you have already done all of this work, so now you're just kind of copying and pasting and arranging. 5 is about monitoring student learning, so you know that's about assessments. What they're going to ask you to do is they're going to ask you to describe how the assessments throughout, and you've already planned that with lots of good formative assessments, throughout the learning segment will provide direct evidence of your students' development of the competencies in whatever discipline you're working in. Okay? For phys ed, you're working in the psychomotor, and then choose one. I'd like you to choose, for phys ed, it's important to choose the cognitive domain because that hits your academic language. It just makes it easier for you. Okay? For everybody else, you're going to be asked to describe how the assessments that you have designed help demonstrate that students have met the learning objectives that you've set aside for them, either regarding literacy or math. Okay? So now you're describing. What you're going to do here is you're going to use that beautiful chart that you created for ETWS 3, which is your assessment, that assessment table. Do you remember that, where you had the assessment, the modifications, and then you had the specific learning goals that each assessment connects to? You're actually going to go through now, go through the chart, and you can copy and paste the information from the chart, write a little bit about each one of those assessments. Do it in order, so you're going to start with day 1. Here are all the assessments. Day 2, here are the assessments. Day 3, here are the assessments. And notice, you're not just listing, you're describing, okay? So if you take your table and you say, this is the assessment I'm going to use, this is when I use it, this is how it will provide me with information of the learning objectives, and don't worry about the modifications for A, right? And then anything else you want to say about it, that's a good description. So you really only need per assessment 1 or 2 sentences, okay? So that's what you're doing for your assessments. And again, you're not writing about how students did. You're not doing anything except writing in future tense. You're planning right now. These are the assessments I will be using. B. This one is where you're going to explain how the design or adaptation of your planned assessments allow students with special needs to demonstrate their learning. So this is addressed by looking at that column in your ETWS Task 3 where you were writing about all the modifications and the accommodations that you were going to make. So you can go through, and for any modifications you can say on day 1, the formative assessment, these are the modifications that I made, and there's a why, right? Because you're asked to explain. What's important with this particular question B is that if you identify in your Context for Learning 1A any students who are classified, who are English language learners, who have 504s or IEPs, and you don't write down here about how you will modify and accommodate for them, you won't pass this particular rubric, okay? So this is what your EdTPA template looks like for your planning. And again, you've got 2 of them. The other thing, of course, you have is you have models, okay? So everybody in their folder has the templates and also the models. So this is your Task 1 Planning Commentary model. I don't think I actually gave you a 1A model because that one is really short and you don't really need one. But if you look, this is your Task 1 PE model, and you can look at it, you can open it up, and everybody has these. I will show you. Okay, and this is filled out. This was filled out in 2014. I think the questions are the same. They might be slightly different, but I don't think so. And I'll put some more models up today so that you've got a lot of good models for 1A in each of the subjects, some of our newest passes. But at any rate, there's a good solid model for you to consult. Okay, and that's again for PE. For elementary, you have the same thing. Your models are here. Your templates are down here because you have more with the math. So for you, you're doing the Context for Learning is 1A, okay? And Planning Commentary is 1E. These other ones are math, don't worry about it. So Context for Learning and Planning Commentary, and then your models, 1E, there's your planning commentary, okay? And then for math, same deal. Okay. You have your Context for Learning is here, your planning commentary is here, and planning commentary for the math is here, okay? And again, I will go through today and add some more models just so you have lots of options. But let's go back to where we started, which is the assignments page. And you're going to do EdTPA Task 1 for December 6th. Now remember, both 1A and E are drafts. I'm going to be reading them and giving you feedback as appropriate, but really do rely heavily on the feedback I gave you on your ETWS assignments. And know that the way I score these is I give you points for completing the templates. I'm not scoring rubrics on these because I'm not allowed to, but I can give you just points for the course for getting them done. You're going to lay out your first draft, and then after that we're going to be looking at rubrics, more models. We're going to study what we can do to improve these. Okay, but for now it's just like with the ETWS, this is your first shot. All right, good luck. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I'll see you next week.